welcome to today's Print Month presentation. Today is also the opening of the fall online edition of the IFPDA Fair, but first we have the tremendous honor of visiting with legendary master printer, Felix Harlan, and his special guest, Kiki Smith. Harlan & Weaver is one of New York's most specialized print shops and publishers focused on contemporary applications of traditional etching and other forms of intaglio printmaking. They were founded in 1984, bringing together the skills of Felix Harlan and the late Carroll Weaver. The list of museums that hold works by Harlan & Weaver in their collections is long, but here are just a few. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, New York Public Library and the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, as well as the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, the British Museum and Tate Britain in London, and the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Among America's second generation of collaborative printers, Harlan & Weaver has built a reputation over the course of 35 years for developing close working relationships with artists and tailoring their methods to each project, producing some of the most notable etchings of the past several decades. They collaborated with Louise Bourgeois from 1989 until the last year of her life, producing nearly a third of all the prints she made in her lifetime, far more than any other printer. James Siena, Nicole Eisenman, and Kiki Smith, with whom we have the pleasure of speaking today, are among the other artists that have deep relationships with Harlan & Weaver. And with that, I want to turn the program over to Felix and Jane. We will have a PowerPoint presentation first, and then the studio visit and conversation with Kiki. If you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can during the program. And with that, I will turn the program over to Felix and Jane. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jenny, for the lovely introduction. And it's a real pleasure to be here. We're going to show a few slides initially. This is Carroll Weaver. On the right, Maggie, who now works for Bourgeois, and Kiki. This is Carroll and myself working on this print entitled In a Bower by Kiki Smith, a multi-plate, very extravagant alla pupe application with this one as well. These are, we've gone back to Kiki and Carroll, it's okay. And we will go back to Bourgeois momentarily. Mark Strand signing one of 3 editions he produced here. These are prints of the Blasket Islands in Ireland. Clemente, this is a dry point we produced with Clemente. These are plates in progress by the Colombian artist José Antonio Suárez Londoño. And this is one of 4. Here I am with the team, Carol and Derek literally in the background, and we did this project for Parasol Press of mathematicians' favorite works. Chris Martin here, and this is a shot of Steve facing a Steve DiBenedetto plate. This is the plate itself, Steve working on a large plate, and this is the final print. Carol wiping. That's our neighborhood in the background. Joanne Greenbaum working on a large print with us, Carol and Maggie. I think that might be Johi Kim discussing colors. Donald Batchelor, Carl with Elise Boissonté and Note Vital, and this is the print was made. It's a sugar lift taken from 2 sheep. Stanley Whitney color proofing his print, Yellow Changing. It's a lovely aquatent spit bite of green, yellow, and blue, and the way they combine. Here's the Bourgeois. This is the first series we did with Louise Bourgeois in 1989 for Peter Blum, and the title is Anatomy. I don't remember exactly how many prints were in the series, but they were a series of dry points. And this was really how we got introduced to Louise's work. This print is Mountain Lakes, a variant on Mountain Lakes. This was done for the Louvre, the Calcographie du Louvre. And there was a blue version and a red version. Louise liked them both, so she kept the red version for herself. These are prints from Reparation, dry point and engraving. This spiraling figure is based on one of her hanging sculptures. The image in the middle is of her tools that she used to sew. And the other one is nausea, which I think refers to homesickness. And we published this in 2003. There are more prints in the series, but we'll look at those later. Kiki, Fawn, 2001. And on the other side, Goats in Trees 2020, which the artist published herself. It's a charming print in soft ground and aquatint. Fawn is really an exercise in line drawing, line etching, with aquatint and polishing to render tones. So Kiki got very deeply involved in aquatint and line at that period. James Siena, working on one of his prints. I think this one that he's shown working on might be No Man's Land, but to the right is a very well-known print of his titled Upside Down Devil Variation, also engraved and printed in a kind of brown-black. Another engraving series by Siena. After becoming very confident with straight lines, James went on to tackle curving lines, which are quite a bit more difficult to engrave with a burin. And to the left, you can see the progressives. We actually pulled progressives every time he made a state. We would pull an impression and photograph it. This one is titled Non-Slice. And there is also a larger version of this composition. Trenton Doyle Hancock working on his a print series that was published by James Cohan Gallery. The title is The Ossified Theossified. I don't recall now how many prints were in the series, but it was a very complicated edition. You can see here, this is the title page. Trenton did all of the work on this, the title page and the colophon page were all designed and drawn by him. It's basically a continuation of his ongoing story of, these alternative life forms and the kind of activities they get up to. The one in the center is called Meat Fountain. And then there's the colophon page I mentioned previously, which he incorporated some test plates and, basically we just, it was a fascinating project to do with Trenton. He was very imaginative and in a way demanding. I wasn't trying to make things difficult, but he just kind of had very complicated ideas about how he was going to make etchings in a series. But it was a great deal of fun to work on this one. We come to a publication by Harlan Weaver by Nicole Eisenman. This one is titled Watermark After a Vacation Home. And we're going to see, first of all, states, and they're numbered here, states 2 through 4. There were eventually approximately 20 states. Nicole was very adept at adding and then removing and adjusting tones by manipulating the copper. So you can see sometimes it's an additive process, and then she will go in and scrape out large areas of the tabletop, make adjustments to the background tones, all the time also adding details, which are very amusing. You can read the book covers. And, as I said, the details are quite fascinating here. Stage 8 is the final stage, but it actually took us a few more steps to get there. I just pulled the ones that had the most radical kind of jumps. This is on the left. We have some working states from a print that was eventually issued as 12 heads. We had been giving Nicole smaller plates to work on while we were working on the larger images, and she was also testing techniques, testing applications that she later on used in other prints. the center, no, I say second from the left on the top was done by dipping broken toothpicks in acid and then laying them on an aqua tinted plate. Its center right is a piece of plastic window screening soaked in ferric chloride and then laid on top of an aqua tinted plate, and so on. So she's exploring a lot of the potential for what she could do in the studio, and eventually it occurred to us that they were so nice, we ought to do something with them. So they actually fit rather nicely into a rectangle, and we issued them as that. Two photographs of Nicole working in the sink, doing spit bite on her large plate titled Beer Garden. And here it is. It has many layers of sugar lift and acid applied by hand. In the bottom of the beer mug, you can see there was all spit bite and then polishing to adjust tones. Nicole was, as I said, very good at judging the tones by looking at the metal. And she could tell, pretty much what was going on with the acid as we applied it to the large plate. That's it?
Yeah, and right now we're gonna do a studio tour of our shop. So we're gonna change the cameras.
So yeah, if everyone can just bear with us while we shift our focus from this desktop computer to a phone.
So the studio here is at 83 Canal Street. We've been here since, I think we signed the lease in 1985, which in some ways was really the beginning of the shop as it is now. Prior to that, we had rented spaces and we'd kind of bounced around different kind of venues. Like Carroll worked at the Blackburn workshop. I worked for various other printers. And, sometimes we printed for artists in their own workshops. But we found this location because a friend was living here and had a studio in the building, and there was a vacancy. And it was about the right price, and we liked the neighborhood, so we've stayed the whole time. And we've expanded gradually as other spaces became available, but right now we occupy 3 rooms, and we have a press in each room. So we can walk around, and I'll talk a little bit about the shop. Okay. So we're going to walk to the front of the studio, which overlooks Albert Street. We have some prints set up, and this is Sarah Smith, who works here, and she'll be demonstrating sheen palette on one of Kiki's plates. Sarah's been with us for many years and is also an expert bookbinder and portfolio builder with her own business called Stockpile. But more on that later. Anyway, this is where the artists work because we have the best light here. We do the plate processing in this other room, which was our first room, and where we have the sinks and other tables and setups for addition. This is our main room for working on the plates and additioning. We have 2 large sinks, plate cutter, materials, and this, I don't know if you can see it, this big old brand press. The press was built in 1983, and we bought it from Gerald Parker when he moved to the West Coast. It's old, but it's very reliable, and it will do large plates. So in spite of the difficulty getting it into the building, it's been a great addition to the shop. Most of our chemical work is done in here, but we also have a tray set aside for soaking paper. Various chemicals over there. And in this situation, Sarah has set up to put glue on collate paper. And we'll be printing on this paper later on. So we can go back in the other room and start presenting a few things. I think since Kiki will be joining us, we might begin with one of her prints. It's titled Fawn, the one I mentioned previously, from 2001. It's line etch and aquatent. A well-known print by Kiki Smith titled Ginzer, and this one was from 2000, so it preceded Fawn. As you can see, we worked on scratched metal. We had some very good quality metal, but it had been moved badly. But Kiki didn't really mind the scratches and was able, as she proofed, and this went through multiple states, so the more she proofed, the more the scratches got sort of worn down.
Felix, just let us know when you'd like Kiki to join the conversation. She's standing by.
Well, I think Kiki should join at this point.
Excellent.
Okay. How's this astroturf? Okay.
Hmm? We'll leave it for you to talk about it, if you want to.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Hold on one second. Let's see. Sitting coloring in prints.
Okay.
So this was a print that I made. My cat died, and I was very fond of my cat. And I had earlier tried to make an image of a pietà with myself and my cat, but my cat was alive then, and it wasn't very convincing. But and then when he died, I had photographs taken of me holding my cat, and then I had my cat by my bed for the night, and then the next day I brought it down to Harlan and Weaver, and I asked them if they could give me a plate. And so they gave me a plate, and I laid the cat down and traced the size so that I would have the size right. And I took a lot of photographs, and then I brought my cat home and buried it. But then I worked from photographs, and it was very, I'm I don't know, maybe like not a graceful printmaker. Like it takes me a long time. So I think, probably we made about 25 proofs of this or something, and I went too far at times and then had to bring it back. But for me, it was very, I'm kind of feel like I'm somebody learning on the job. I mean, I went to Harlan and Weaver specifically to learn how to make etchings, because I had experience making etchings, but I needed much more experience to have any competence of it. And I'm still in a learning process with it, but this was something very satisfying because I built it up with aquatint and then with line. And when I first went, Felix had me keep the aquatint plate and the etch plates separate because he knew I had no experience, but eventually I was allowed to put them together.
Why? I don't know why I did that, but anyway.
But it was interesting anyway. Well, because I think I didn't know it. I mean, I honestly knew nothing about it. I had taken a class at the Lower East Side Print Shop and at Blackburn, but I really had no really practical experience making prints. And I really tortured Harlan and Weaver because
it was a pleasure having you here, really.
And he bites his wrist. I would work at home, work till 6 o'clock at night, ride my bicycle down to Harlan Weaver because they're close to where I live, and with a plate in my basket, and then would stay till like 8 or 9 or 10 because they all anyway seemed to stay very late, but I really would push it sometimes. And but it was for me an part of my life. To work with Carroll and Felix and to be in a safe environment that really fosters that you can have, you know, sort of find what your experience is and kind of go all over the place too. This was one that Carroll and I started
Is it Mount
at Mount Holyoke.
Yeah.
Mount Holyoke College, you know, one of the 5 sister colleges or whatever. And we started it as a visiting artist and visiting printmaker. And then, which is very easy to do, like go someplace and start something, but then you have to go home and work for several more months or years to finish it. And this eventually was finished.
Yeah, we finished it here by, I think, maybe adding some aquatent in the blue, and you use soft ground in the little helmet thing. And then layers and layers of aquatent just polished back and adjusted constantly. So this one was from 2001, the same year as Fall.
Yeah, we made a lot of prints then. And also, you know, watching Felix, for me, how he could work back and forth on a plate. You know, it turns out, like, I watched Carroll ink a million plates, and I hate inking plates. I can't stand having ink on my fingers, but I really took to burnishing and scraping and sanding. And, you know, I do it for other people too now, just because I think there's something so meditative and enjoyable about that you keep building up this energy back and forth, like going in 2 directions, and that all the scars and cutting and scraping, or, you know, often I'm adding more marks in than I'm taking away and stuff, but all of that enriches print, and it's like a ghost in there that hovers, that gives something energy.
Yeah, I'm thinking of your print of the goats in trees, where you extensively removed in the foreground, and you know, what a beautiful texture that was to see what was there before, and then the layers of sanding and scraping you did on top of it.
I mean,
so this metal work, is this a type of metal work for you, like making jewelry, or you know, the work you do on bronzes? Can you make it?
I would say that, you know, I don't know what percentage, but well over 50% of what I make comes very directly from printmaking, and from that incising and from etching, the idea of, in general, etching, like the idea of incising something and then making something, you know, often something 3-dimensional out of that, or working flat, but most of what I do has some kind of print element or print methodology or something. And, you know, I mean, I think I didn't realize ever when I was younger, or like how completely nerdy I am. And, you know, I think a lot of printmakers are like, there's something incredibly fascinating by, you know, these small nuances. It's why it's so like incredible to take the students to the print fair and you know, have them be able to like look close up and see the tremendous sort of endless variety you can have from a very small parameters, you know. And it's really I mean, printmaking is, you know, a very radical practice and has had radical implications for the world and for, you know, the last couple 100 years. I mean, just in terms of kind of as a model to me always of the construction and deconstruction of reality, and seeing that reality is, you know, being made up of gossamer nothingness, and you're building up that nothingness into a kind of illusionary space that we exist in. But you know, it's completely fascinating, and it's, you know, once you're in it, you can spend your whole lifetime in very minute bits of it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean about that. Yeah. I'm going to put up your your print of the goats and trees, because, you know, I thought the story behind it was fascinating, that you had done that big installation on the island of Idra, and that although these goats are not from Idra, goats were apparently a large part of the diet. And this is what I was referring to, all of this work you did down here to remove something that you can just make out under the surface. But the kind of patina on the surface that you produced held ink in a really nice way.
You know, a lot of prints I made originally when I started teaching, I would, you know, make sort of examples of a technique, or I would be, you know, I'd basically call Harlan and Weaver and ask them how to do something in the middle of my class, which I think annoyed some students. But I thought that's a good lesson for an artist, to be resourceful, like to not be stopped by what you don't know. That was more important than that. I didn't know that much about printing when I started. But you know, at a certain point, I started just making plates and sort of trying to trick myself into having different experiences. I mean, some things were like, you know, learning soap ground, or learning, you know, using stop out, or things that I hadn't had so much experience with. And so I just continued to make up sort of, you know, any, you know, first to keep it entertaining for myself primarily, I guess, but to kind of, trick myself out and trick the students a little bit, and to seeing how they could combine all different techniques together, and you know, go like be fearless in it. I mean, because copper is so generous to you, you can really be fearless in it. I mean, you know, when, like you were showing the Nicole Eisenman prints, like to me, she's just a genius printmaker. I'm so always impressed and astounded by her, like what a natural sense she has of it, of, you know, and that thing of just pulling and pushing and pulling and pushing, and that you can just keep going anywhere. You know, it's not just like a print is this little thing and it just has to do that. I mean, the thing that's really great about etching too is that because it's an incised line, it's a really physical, you know, when you print it, then the ink fills that gap and you have a little triangle of ink sort of, you know, that you can blow that up the size of a very large wall and it will hold, you know, unlike a drawing, a pencil line or a lithography line, you know, you can just blow it up enormously. And, you know, to me, and you can then take it and turn it into sculptures, or, you know, just go anywhere with it.
Well, that's interesting, because I've always, you know, heard people say that etching has in some way inspired their work, but for you, I think it's a very fluid situation. You can work from either direction, either from your sculpted work or from the prints and back and forth. And it must be, I think it must be great for the students to see an artist working on plates, because as you said, you know, you don't, when you're a student, at least for myself initially, I didn't really realize what the parameters were. You know, I wasn't sure what this thing was supposed to look like. You know.
Well, I think with Valerie Hammond, both at NYU and Columbia, and we really try also to show the students that we have our lives at stake in it. You know, we're deeply engaged in it. It's not like, well, this is our day job, or, you know, it's gonna like take care of us in our dotage. You know, it's really passion.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, as we talked a little bit yesterday about how you feel about the prints you've made entirely yourself versus, say, prints that you make in a professional shop, because it seems like now you are very much involved in every step of the process, except editioning. How does that? Do you have any observations on the different situations? Yes.
Oh, I mean, for me, in a certain sense, I had less opportunity to work with publishers in the last years, and And also I moved upstate, so I had less time in my life, you know, to go to New York, and there really aren't publishers upstate. And, you know, life just changes in weird ways, and shops change and shops close and new shops are opening, or they might have different, you know, focus on the methods they're working on and stuff. But so, you know, the same way when I came to Harlan Weaver, I needed to make more prints a year, you know, and I did a lot of self-publishing, you know, and some of them are good, some of them are, you know, like that, but I needed to do it to learn how to do it. And, you know, I'm still discovering and learning many techniques or weird ways of working that suit me, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, I know that the ones that I made myself, you know, it's just, I mean, they're relatively small. Like at school, you know, we get like a piece of copper that's 18 by 20 and, or maybe 18 by 24, and we cut it up. And, you know, and so I started making just small prints, the same size the students were asking to work on. And, you know, I think also it's important, like showing the students that one has to be willing to bring things to fruition, that it's very important to finish, like the thing about finishing prints. And obviously sometimes it takes years to finish things, but I very much like, you know, I've had the opportunity to be a guest artist in schools.
This one was made at a school, I believe.
Yeah, it was made in Ann Arbor with Andy Polkovitz, who's like a really great printmaker. And, you know, so I went there as a visiting artist. I made about 5 different prints, you know, plates in about 2 days or something, went home and then spent a year and a half finishing them. But
yeah, I was going to comment on finishing, because, you know, I feel like right now we are actually finishing a lot of prints, not just with you, but, you know, you might do a bunch of work with an artist and only some of them are going to be published. And then you have these really nice prints, plates that were never editions. So we've actually been going back and doing that kind of work with sometimes with your prints and sometimes Steve DiBenedetto. And on the back wall behind the press, there is 2 color versions of a print called Contagion by Nicole Eisenman. The print was begun in 2011 or 2012. Yeah. And, you know, it was kind of put aside at the time, and we're going back into it now with to see if Nicole will approve some of the color variants. And I think she prefers the one on the left, the original one. But, you know, that's happening a lot. And I think it's fascinating because, you know, you change, the printer changes, the artist changes, and, you know, but the metal doesn't change. So you still have that out.
But it's something nice to address, you know, like, I mean, I have prints that are sitting on the other table here that I started in 2014 that were perfect in 2014, but it turned out that the man selling the copper was selling bad copper. And so then I've remade the plates once or twice over, but I never, the first time it was made really from love. So I keep going back to those plates. And so, you know, I think it's, maybe people don't have to finish things, but to me, you know, I wake up in my sleep having to think about things like that. I love like Steve DiBenedetto's print, so I'm very happy about him to finish his plates because I bug him every time I see him. You know?
Yeah, Steve really likes printmaking. We see him like once a year. And speaking of going back into images, the black helicopter was done, geez, I don't even remember now, 2007. And I always liked it. And during COVID, he was upstate and, actually in Massachusetts, and we were working back and forth through the mail. And he did all of these color variants with hand coloring, color pencils, gouache off of the plate, with the idea that we would kind of arrive at a finished color image. Well, that we never did. So I did a roll on that print. So that's a black roll over the incised or etched line, which is a little unusual. But this is only a fraction of what he did. He did many, many, many versions of this. I think he's leaning more in the direction of editions that aren't, uniform. That you don't have to pull an edition where everyone is exactly the same. I think he might find that.
Pat Steer is like that, she worked, and I think that's much more how people were in the 19th century. But they look like Krishna Redding kind of prints, like viscosity prints or something.
Yeah, right.
Something I still have to.
Also, speaking of going back in time, this is a print by Bonnie Lucas that I made with her in 1981, which was really at the beginning of my attempts to become a printer. And, you have to find artists who are willing to work with you. So Bonnie did, and, we did the edition and we sold, she has a few, we might've sold a couple, and then she went back and hand colored them this year. So, for her, the image is still fresh. You can keep going on it. And I thought it was just a great way to resolve and finish, complete the edition.
Well, it's very nice to hand color, because in a certain way etchings are like if you make an edition, it is like a coloring book or something. You have a black graphic line that each time, I mean, that's the thing that's nice. It's like each time you get to address reality and you can kind of change it and see it as being fluid. That it's very, that it just gives you opportunities to kind of go places that you wouldn't, it's always good to have a stack of prints or something around your house that needs attention, because it also gives you something to do when you are freaking out and don't know what to do in life.
Yeah, well, during 2020, there wasn't much going on, so Bonnie and I continued to work. And we made a trio of prints, which this one is, this is also a hand-colored print. The soft ground. We did a small edition, 9 prints. It's titled Flower Girl. And
nice.
She actually collects children's coloring books, and is fascinated by that idea of filling in lines, in between lines. And so maybe we'll go on to Bourgeois. Why not? This is a portfolio from 2003. We showed a couple of these, previously. This one is La Nausée. It's all dry point. This is the spiraling woman, which is, she is suspended here, engraving, lots of dry point, and Bourgeois' characteristic kind of leaving of tone around the edges, which she always liked to see the edges or the corners of the metal. She wanted that emphasized. Another hanging composition, Cocoon, which also has a resemblance to her sculpted work.
I definitely relate to what Kiki was saying earlier about kind of sculptural objects and prints working back and forth with one another.
Yeah.
These Bourgeois are a really nice example of that.
Yes. And spiraling forms kind of repeating in this dry point. M is for mother. These are the tools. This may be my favorite of the bunch because, as a printer, I really like tools a lot. And I've always loved Jim Dine's tool prints. So although I don't think they're related, I'm just particularly fond of this. It's an engraving on top of dry point. Louise, liked everything to be very dark, very deeply inscribed or dry pointed. So I went over the dry point line with engraving to make it sharper and more readable. This print is titled Happy House, Engraving and Aquatint. This one, I don't know the title, but it's dry point and aquatint. So reparation was one of her big themes in terms of repairing relationships, repairing fabric, tapestries, that type of thing. I have also a small print which incorporates cloth. It's titled Baby and Butterfly. Later in life, Bourgeois began to kind of go through her fabrics that were upstairs in the house and not only made three-dimensional work out of them, but also had us print etchings on top. The little baby is, of course, just printed on the paper, but the butterfly is on cloth. This also shows Bourgeois' characteristic kind of tonal wipes, where she would like to highlight a particular area, like the baby, and then leave tone around the edges. And so you get the deeper blue.
Felix, we have a question from a viewer, and it's a question that comes up often, and it is perhaps complicated to answer, but a question about how artists come to work with you. And I suppose in that we would speak to the difference between the projects that you produce for other publishers versus projects which you produce for yourself.
Okay, that's a great question. And we have two prints here that would probably illustrate that.
Jane, can you stand a little bit closer?
Okay.
Yes, great.
Over the summer, we were invited to make a series of prints for a hotel that's going to open near here on the Lower East Side. And they wanted to have work by people who had recently come to the United States and had settled, you know, some in New York or sometimes on the Lower East Side itself. This print is by Maya Ruth Lee. It is titled Bondage, Baggage, Lift. And on our website, we have some images of Maria actually making this print. It's a sugar lift aquatint. She makes bundles of cloth, and then this was impressed onto a plate that was prepared for aquatint. After the lift part, which is the sugar lift or lift ground, it was etched to a full black. And it's very much like some paintings she has made in much the same way, where she applies paint to one of these bundled objects and then impresses that onto canvas. So this is essentially a very close relationship to her paintings. I don't know how close Jane can get, but the sugar lift did really well. It even picked up some of the weave of the fabric itself. And it's a rather interesting print. To the left of it is a print that was commissioned by the Hotel Nine Orchard. It's by Katya Santigonias. And Katya is, you know, quite a prolific printmaker, but we hadn't worked with her before. And it is like a 3 or 4 layer print, beginning with soft ground for these tonal areas, and then layers of hard ground etching imposed on top. So it was a very lengthy project for Katya to draw. She spent many, many days here, just, you know, leaning over this plate, drawing for hours at a time.
I guess also to answer your question, the artist just like needs to be open to opportunities, because these two artists came to us from the hotel, who is a publisher for the very big project. We didn't know Maya Ruth Lee before this project, and she hasn't done any printmaking prior working with us. So for her, it was like a new experimental project. For Katya, it was a little bit different because Katya already printed with a lot of like different publishers. And she she has done some woodblock printing, lithography, and intaglio and etching. So for her, it wasn't like something new that she like tried with us, but she never worked with our shop. So it was a really nice opportunity, just like to introduce her to our shop, and we just continued after we finished our project with the hotel. So these two new editions that we're releasing through IFPDA Fall Fair. It is on our page. You can look it on the IFPDA Fall Fair website.
Neither are editions, I should add.
They are still in progress, as well as the one on the left by Nicole Eisenman. But we hope that we're gonna release it soon. Hopefully by the end of this year.
I don't know if we can squeeze it in, but Sarah is beginning the process.
Yes,
of
yes, please. We have time.
Okay, inking one of the Kiki prints that we spoke about previously.
And Jane, if you can just get in there a little bit closer. Thank you so much.
So just using an inking card and applying the ink to the surface of the plate. And then I'm going to use tarlatan, which is a starched material, to buff the ink off the surface of the plate. For the first tarlatan wipe, I kind of just push the ink into the lines so we get a nice inky print.
So another way, like for the artists, like to work with the shop, like ours, just really introduce themselves like to us. Come for a tour. We always welcome artists to just visit our shop, even if they just like want to learn something new and just like want to see a shop or some prints. With this project, Kiki made plates herself, as she mentioned earlier. And we just finally editioning them and publishing them. So all the publication by Harlan and Weaver.
So this is the plate for a work that you're showing now in the fair?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
And I guess also artists can publish themselves if they wish to, or if they have a gallery, the gallery can publish the prints. So there are like a lot of many ways that the artist can be introduced to a publisher or to a shop.
So just to finish the plate, to get the whites up on the plate, I'm doing a hand wiping technique. So I just get a little bit of chalk on my hand, just enough to attract the ink off the plate onto my hand. And you can see how there's still, the plate is holding ink tone here, and then here is where I've done the hand wiping. So you can see kind of like the sheen of the polish, the metal. So just gonna do that all over the plate.
The plate was also steel faced. That's why it's more like a silver color than the regular copper color.
And we steel face it because the copper is quite a soft metal. So to keep the integrity of the lines when it's under the immense pressure of the press, the steel facing makes the copper stronger. Well, you know, steel is stronger than copper. And then I'm just going to do a little edge wipe to make sure we don't have any ink along the edges of the plate. And then I'm going to go get the paper ready.
So here is the finished plate. And we're just going to print it on a calais, which is a very thin Japanese paper in our case. It was already, it's been like pre-glued and pre-cut to be printed on. What the calais, or the full name is the Shin calais, does, it receives the ink better. So all the details essentially print much, much better than just on a regular printing paper.
It's also for color, because the colors are often in beautiful natural tones, and it adds just a little bit more interest, against the whiteness of the European paper. So it's both for printing quality and for the sheen and just the color it provides as well.
Touch the paper. So for the shinkole, I've already prepped the gambi. So we're using a Japanese paper that we've already put the paste on the back. And then I cut it to size. There are a few different ways to do shinkole, but on this plate, we have a beveled edge. And so I've pre-cut the gambi to fit within the beveled edge. So it'll be nice in the plate area. Other techniques we've used to do shinkole is to make the gambi bigger than the plate and then cut the gambi when it's on the plate. But again, since we have the bevel, already prepped the gambi.
Here's the bevel up close.
Our piece of gambi that already has the paste on the back. And you can see we just cut it to fit within the bevel edge.
We usually print on paper that's usually larger than the final size, and that's what we're doing here. It makes it easier for handling, and we dry the prints by stretching them on boards, which keeps more of the plate mark. Having a nice crisp plate mark is kind of cool.
We just had a question about spraying the plate. A viewer wondering why you sprayed the plate and what you sprayed it with.
You just spray it with water, and that's just to keep the paper separated off of the ink. Since it's an oil-based ink, the water kind of separates off of the oil-based ink. And so the shinkole paper, if it was dry and we just stuck it down on the plate, it might pick up ink. So we want to wait until the colle paper is gone through the press with the backing sheet to then pick up the ink. So you can see the difference in the gambi paper color versus the backing sheet paper, and the pressure of the press and the water from the backing sheet rehydrated the paste and adhered the gambi to the backing sheet.
And it's a very permanent stick down. You can soak these in a tray of water, and the gambi does not come off easily.
One of our viewers is wondering if you steel coat the plate after it's incised with the image and how that might affect the detail of the image.
Yeah, we do. We coat it in a bath of electrolyte, and we have iron. It's really an iron coating. It's very, very thin. It's micro thin. I'd never really, only once when I put on too much, I left it in the bath, in the electrolyte for too long, did it seem to interfere. But it really only needs an extremely thin coating that I rarely see any difference. In this one, for instance, I didn't notice any difference at all. I don't think it's I know people are a little wary of it, but I don't think it's a problem in any way. And it can be removed if you want to. The iron comes off with a very mild solution of nitric acid. That would be if an artist said, okay, put the plating on, and then they said, no, I want to add some more stuff. So then you can just take the plating off, and the artist can work, and you can do it over again. It is particularly important for dry point, of course, and mezzotint. I don't think without the invention of electroplating, you couldn't really get many pulls off the dry point, before it began to noticeably wear down. So it's all on the plus side, I think.
I love that we have so many printmakers who join us for these programs. We're getting incredibly specific questions, but wondering what type of glue you used.
It is a wheat paste, a buffered wheat paste. Any more on that?
We also use calcium.
Oh yeah, well, by buffering, I mean, we add 10% of calcium carbonate to neutralize any traces of acid, or to prevent the print, absorbing acid as quickly, so just a safeguard. We buy the wheat paste from, Talus, which sells conservation materials for printers and for librarians, for instance. There are other, of course, you can use rice paste, you can use methyl cellulose, but over the years, we found that wheat paste is the easiest to work with.
So this is a print by Kiki entitled Sunray, and it's being released through IFPDA Fall Fair. So you can find all the details about this print on the website.
I think the plate was made in maybe 2006, I'm not exact, maybe 2009. I'm not really sure, but it was stored. You can store plates for a very long time, and if the conditions are good, there's no change. So it's kind of nice that way. You can go back and revisit an image.
Great. Well, I think that is a perfect place for us to end our visit with you today. Thank you, Felix. Thank you, Kiki, so much for sharing, and thank you, Jane and Sarah, for sharing with us so generously your time and your incredible vision and expertise. This has been a highlight of Print Month for sure. I hope that everyone can join us on Monday for the next program in the Metropolitan Museum Symposium on the Grosvenor School Artists in conjunction with their current exhibition. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, thank you, Felix. Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye, Kiki.